The kick landed hard against the wheelchair's metal frame, sending it rolling backward across the marble floor. Dorothy Wellington's frail body jerked violently as Vivian Chase's designer heel connected with the armrest one more time. "You disgust me," Vivian hissed, her perfectly manicured hand gripping the elderly woman's thin wrist until Dorothy whimpered. "Sitting there like some helpless infant, drooling, needing everything. Do you have any idea how pathetic you are?" Dorothy's eyes filled with tears, but no sound escaped her lips. She'd learned months ago that crying only made Vivian angrier. "When Marcus gets back, I'm telling him you fell again, that your dementia is getting worse, that you need to be locked away somewhere." Vivian leaned close, her breath hot against Dorothy's face. "And he'll believe me. He always does." Before we continue with Dorothy's devastating story, please hit that subscribe button and stay with us until the very end. Drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from, so we can see how far this story reaches. Now, let me tell you how we got here. 3 days earlier, Marcus Wellington had kissed his mother goodbye in the foyer of their Buckhead mansion, completely unaware it would be the last normal moment they'd share for a very long time. "I'll be back from Singapore on Friday, Mom," he said, adjusting his tie. "Vivian will take excellent care of you." Dorothy nodded, forcing her lips into something resembling a smile, her trembling hands hidden beneath the cashmere blanket draped across her lap. She wanted to scream, wanted to grab her son's expensive suit jacket and beg him not to leave her alone with that woman. But the words stuck in her throat. They always did anymore. "Dorothy, darling, wave goodbye to Marcus." Vivian cooed from behind the wheelchair, her fingers digging into Dorothy's shoulders just hard enough to hurt without leaving marks. "We're going to have such a lovely week together, aren't we?" Marcus smiled at them both. This picture of his beautiful fiancée, caring for his aging mother, and Dorothy's heart shattered a little more. He couldn't see it. Couldn't see past Vivian's practiced warmth to the monster underneath. The moment Marcus's Mercedes disappeared through the iron gates, Vivian's mask dropped like a stone. "Finally," she breathed, releasing Dorothy's shoulders and walking around to face her. 5 whole days without having to pretend I give a damn about you." Dorothy's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Please, Vivian, I haven't done anything to you." "You exist. That's enough." Vivian pulled out her phone, scrolling through messages without looking up. "Do you know what I was supposed to be doing this week? There's a charity gala in Miami, a yacht party in the Hamptons. But no, I'm stuck here playing nurse to a woman who can't even remember to take her pills without help." "I remember," Dorothy said quietly, gathering what little courage she had left. "I remember everything." Vivian's eyes snapped up sharp and cold as surgical steel. "What did you say?" "I said I remember. The dementia, it's not as bad as you tell Marcus. You've been increasing my medication, making me foggy, making me seem worse than I am, so he won't question you." For just a moment, genuine surprise flickered across Vivian's face. Then she laughed, the sound brittle and cruel, bouncing off the high ceilings. "Well, well, the old bird has some clarity left. Doesn't matter. Who's going to believe you? Marcus thinks you're losing your mind. I've made absolutely sure of that." She crouched down eye level with Dorothy, close enough that Dorothy could smell her expensive perfume, mixed with something darker, something rotten beneath the floral notes. "Here's how this week is going to go," Vivian said, her voice conversational, almost friendly, which made it even more terrifying. "You're going to sit quietly in this chair. You're going to eat when I feel like feeding you. You're going to take whatever pills I give you. And you're going to keep that mouth shut. Because if you don't, I promise you, Dorothy, things will get much, much worse than they already are." Dorothy's hands gripped the wheelchair armrests until her knuckles turned white. "Marcus will find out. Eventually, he'll see what you really are. Marcus is blinded by love. And money." Vivian stood, smoothing her dress with deliberate slowness. "Do you know how much your precious son is worth? $47 million. And when we're married, half of that becomes mine. You think I'm going to let a confused old woman mess that up? You think I've come this far to let you ruin everything?" She walked toward the door, her heels clicking against the marble each step like a countdown. She paused to look back. "Oh, and Dorothy, I had Rosa fired this morning. Told Marcus she was stealing from us. So it's just you and me now. No witnesses. No one to hear you scream. No one to care." The door closed, and Dorothy sat alone in the enormous foyer, understanding with terrible clarity that she was trapped. Truly trapped. And no one was coming to save her. The first day passed in a fog of fear and hunger that gnawed at her stomach like a living thing. Vivian brought her 2 pieces of dry toast and a glass of water for breakfast. Nothing at all for lunch, and a bowl of thin, watery soup for dinner that Dorothy was certain had extra sedatives mixed in. The soup had that bitter aftertaste she'd come to recognize. She pretended to eat, hiding most of it in a napkin, when Vivian turned her back to answer her phone. "Yes, I'm still stuck here," Vivian said into the phone, her voice dripping with false patience. "No, I can't leave her alone. Marcus would have a fit. But don't worry, this situation is temporary. Very temporary." Dorothy's hand shook as she tucked the napkin into her cardigan pocket. Every instinct screamed at her to dump the soup, to refuse the medication. But she'd learned that outright defiance only brought swift punishment. By the second day, Dorothy's mind was clearer than it had been in months. And with that clarity came the full, crushing weight of her situation. She was a prisoner in her own home. The home she'd bought with her late husband 40 years ago. The home where she'd raised Marcus, celebrated his birthdays, nursed him through childhood illnesses, held him when he cried over his father's death. And now she was locked inside it like a criminal. "You're looking better today," Vivian observed that afternoon, wheeling Dorothy toward the sunroom with unnecessary force, making the chair jolt over the threshold. "More alert. Did you skip your medicine like a naughty girl?" "I took it," Dorothy lied, keeping her voice flat and defeated, the way Vivian expected. Vivian's eyes narrowed, studying her like a scientist examining a specimen. "Maybe I need to adjust the dosage. Can't have you getting too clear-headed. Marcus might actually listen if you sound coherent, and we can't have that, can we?" She positioned Dorothy facing the window, the afternoon light too bright, hurting Dorothy's eyes, and then walked away without another word. Dorothy sat there for 6 hours. 6 hours without water, without being helped to the bathroom, without anyone checking to see if she was hot or cold or in pain. When Vivian finally came back, Dorothy had wet herself. The humiliation burned hotter than any physical pain. "Oh, Dorothy," Vivian said, wrinkling her nose in disgust. "Look what you've done. You're worse than a toddler. Maybe I should start putting you in diapers. Would you like that? Would you like your son to come home and see his mother in diapers?" "Please," Dorothy whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Please just help me get cleaned up." "Why should I? You did this to yourself. You couldn't hold it for a few hours? Pathetic." But Vivian wheeled her to the bathroom, handling her roughly, yanking at her clothes, muttering about the indignity of it all. Dorothy closed her eyes and went somewhere else in her mind. Back to when Marcus was 10 and they'd gone to the beach, just the 2 of them, after his father died. She'd taught him to body surf. He'd laughed so hard, swallowing seawater, coming up sputtering and grinning. "Again, Mama, again!" "Stop daydreaming," Vivian snapped, bringing her back to the present with a hard pinch to her arm. "Pay attention when I'm talking to you." That evening, Vivian was on the phone in the next room, her voice carrying through the thin walls like poison seeping through cracks. "No, I can't come to Miami. I told you, I'm stuck here with Marcus's mother until Friday. I know, it's torture. Trust me, it won't be much longer. Once we're married, she's going straight into a facility, the cheapest one I can find." "What?" "No, Marcus won't fight me on it. I'll tell him she's getting violent, that she needs specialized care. He'll be relieved, honestly. The guilt will make him generous with the credit cards. And I'll have full access to the accounts while he's traveling. It's perfect, really. She'll rot in some state-run home, and I'll be living my best life. The caller must have asked a question because Vivian laughed. Inheritance? Please, the old bat could live another 10 years. I'm not waiting that long. No, the plan is to get her committed, get power of attorney while Marcus is overwhelmed and grateful, and then slowly drain the accounts before anyone notices. By the time Marcus figures it out, if he ever does, I'll be in the Maldives with enough money to disappear. Dorothy's blood ran cold. This wasn't just cruelty. This was organized crime, premeditated theft. Vivian had been planning this from the beginning. Her eyes fell on the cordless phone sitting on the side table across the room, just 10 feet away, but might as well have been 10 miles. If she could reach it, if she could call someone, anyone, maybe she could stop this. She gripped the wheelchair's handrims and pushed, moving herself forward, inch by painful inch. Her arms shook with the effort, muscles screaming. Vivian had positioned the chair's brakes on, making it nearly impossible to move. But Dorothy pushed harder, sweat breaking out on her forehead, dripping into her eyes. 8 feet. 6 feet. 4 feet. What the hell do you think you're doing? Dorothy froze. Vivian stood in the doorway, phone still in hand, her face twisted with rage that made her beautiful features ugly and harsh. I asked you a question, Dorothy. What are you doing? Dorothy's mouth was dry as dust. I just wanted to call Marcus, just to hear his voice. That's all. I miss him. Liar. Vivian crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbing the wheelchair and jerking it backward so hard that Dorothy's head snapped back, pain shooting through her neck and down her spine. You were going to tell him, weren't you? Going to cry about how mean I am, how scared you are. Going to try to turn him against me. No, I swear, I just wanted... The slap came fast and hard, Vivian's palm connecting with Dorothy's cheek with enough force to make her ears ring and stars explode behind her eyes. Dorothy cried out, tasting blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her mouth. Don't you ever try that again, Vivian said, her voice low and dangerous, vibrating with barely controlled fury. Do you understand me? The phones are off limits. The doors stay locked. You go where I put you, and you stay there until I say you can move. Is that clear? She grabbed Dorothy's face, fingers digging into her jaw hard enough to leave marks. And if you say one word to Marcus when he calls tonight, if you so much as sound upset or scared or anything other than perfectly fine, I will make you sorry. I'll start by withholding your real medication. The heart pills, the blood pressure medicine, the thyroid medication. Want to see how long you last without those? Want to find out what a stroke feels like? Dorothy's vision blurred with tears, but she refused to look away. Some small part of her, some core of strength she thought was long dead, flickered to life. You won't get away with this. I already am. Vivian released her roughly, pushing her face to the side. Look around, Dorothy. I've already won. You're helpless. You're alone. And no one is coming to save you. She ripped the phone cord from the wall with one vicious yank. Oh, and no dinner tonight. You need to learn that actions have consequences. Maybe hunger will teach you to behave. That night, alone in her bedroom after Vivian had roughly transferred her to bed and left without even covering her with a blanket, Dorothy lay in the dark and made a decision. She couldn't wait for rescue. Marcus wouldn't be home for 3 more days, and she wasn't sure she would survive 3 more days under Vivian's care. 3 more days of being starved, drugged, abused. She needed to save herself, even if it killed her. The next morning, Vivian came in with breakfast, setting a tray on the bedside table without looking at Dorothy. 1 piece of toast, half a glass of orange juice, and 2 pills in a small plastic cup. "Morning, Dorothy. How are we feeling today?" The false cheerfulness in her voice was like nails on a chalkboard. "Tired," Dorothy said truthfully, her whole body aching from lying in one position all night. "Everything hurts." "Well, take your medicine. It'll help." Vivian smiled, but her eyes remained cold and dead, like a doll's eyes. Dorothy reached for the pills with shaking hands, bringing them to her mouth. At the last second, she tucked them under her tongue, swallowing the juice to make it look real, the bitter taste making her gag. "Good girl." Vivian picked up the tray. "I have some errands to run. I'll be back in a few hours. Don't even think about trying anything stupid. I'll know." The moment Dorothy heard Vivian's car pull out of the driveway, she spat the pills into her hand. She recognized them now, after months of forced medication. Sedatives. Twice the normal dose. Enough to keep her foggy and compliant all day. She looked at the bedroom door, then at the window. She was on the 2nd floor, but there was a trellis outside covered in climbing roses that she'd planted 30 years ago. In her younger days, she could have climbed down easily. Now, at 71, with arthritis and weakened muscles from months of forced inactivity, it seemed impossible. But staying here seemed more impossible. Dorothy pulled herself from the bed, every movement and exercise in agony. Her legs buckled when she tried to stand, and she grabbed the nightstand to keep from falling, her hips screaming in protest. The wheelchair was across the room. Vivian had moved it on purpose, she realized now, making her dependent, helpless, too weak to even cross her own bedroom. So Dorothy crawled. It took 20 minutes to cross 12 feet of carpet, her knees screaming, her breath coming in ragged gasps that burned her lungs. But she made it to the wheelchair, pulled herself up using every ounce of strength she had left, and collapsed into the seat. The window. She had to try. She wheeled herself over, her arms trembling, unlocked it, pushed it open. Fresh air hit her face for the first time in days. She gulped it down like water. Dorothy looked down at her legs, useless things that barely held her weight anymore. She looked at her arms, thin and weak, the muscle wasted away. She couldn't climb down, she knew that with absolute certainty. But maybe she could get someone's attention. Maybe someone would see, would care, would help. She wheeled back to her nightstand, found a notepad and pen that Vivian hadn't bothered to confiscate, because who would Dorothy write to? With trembling hands, she wrote in large, desperate letters, "Help me. I'm being held against my will. Call police. Dorothy Wellington, 2847 Magnolia Drive." She folded the paper into an airplane, the way she'd taught Marcus when he was 6 years old and bored on a rainy afternoon, and threw it as hard as she could toward the street below. It didn't make it far. The paper plane landed in the front yard, partially hidden by azalea bushes. Dorothy threw another, and another, and another. Each one a prayer, a desperate plea, a message in a bottle tossed into an uncaring sea. By the time she heard Vivian's car in the driveway, she'd thrown 23 paper airplanes, praying at least one would be found by someone who cared enough to read it. Vivian's footsteps pounded up the stairs, fast and angry, and Dorothy barely had time to close the window and wheel herself back toward the bed before the door burst open hard enough to bounce off the wall. "What have you been doing?" Vivian demanded, her eyes scanning the room with the precision of a prison guard. "Why are you out of bed? Why is your face flushed?" "Nothing," Dorothy said, hating how her voice shook and betrayed her. "I was trying to get back to bed. I couldn't reach the call button." Vivian's gaze went to the window, and for a heart-stopping moment that seemed to last forever, Dorothy was certain she'd seen the paper airplanes scattered across the yard like fallen leaves. But Vivian just crossed the room and locked the window, testing it twice to make sure. "I'm moving you downstairs," she announced, turning to face Dorothy with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Guest room on the first floor. No windows you can reach, no phone, no call button. Just you and a bed and a TV you can't access the remote for. That's what you get for being sneaky." "Please, Vivian, I won't cause any trouble. Just let me stay in my own room. Please." "Too late for that." Vivian grabbed the wheelchair handles roughly. "You should have thought about that before you tried whatever little stunt you were planning with that window." The guest room was essentially a prison cell. Small, windowless except for one tiny square of glass near the ceiling, with a hospital bed, and nothing else. No furniture, no pictures, no warmth. Just white walls and fluorescent lights that hummed and flickered. Vivian transferred Dorothy roughly, not caring when her hips struck the bed frame hard enough to make Dorothy cry out. Not caring when Dorothy's arm got caught and twisted. "There, much better. Now I don't have to worry about you doing anything stupid." She stood in the doorway, hand on the light switch. "I'll bring you dinner, eventually, if I remember, if I feel like it." The door closed. The lock clicked with the sound of terrible finality. Dorothy lay in the darkness and cried, deep sobs that shook her whole body and made her ribs ache. This couldn't be how her story ended. Locked in a room, starved and medicated into submission, waiting for her son to come home and never believe her because Vivian had spent months making her seem crazy. She must have dozed from exhaustion because she woke to the sound of the lock turning. But it wasn't Vivian who entered. It was Marcus. And for one beautiful moment, Dorothy's heart leaped with hope. "Marcus! Oh, thank God, Marcus! You're home early. You have to listen to me." But the look on his face stopped her cold. He wasn't rushing to her side. He was standing in the doorway with Vivian right behind him, his expression confused and hurt, and something else. Something that looked like pity. "Mom," he said slowly, carefully, like he was talking to a child or someone very fragile. "Vivian called me in Singapore. She said you've been having episodes, that you attacked her yesterday with your cane, that she had to lock you in here for everyone's safety until I could get home." "What? No!" "Marcus, that's not true. That's not what happened. She's lying." "She's been getting worse, Marcus," Vivian said, her voice breaking beautifully, tears already streaming down her face on cue. "I didn't want to worry you during your important trip, but yesterday she tried to hit me. She was screaming, saying horrible, paranoid things about me trying to kill her. I had no choice but to secure her somewhere safe until you got home. I've been so scared, so overwhelmed." "That's not what happened." Dorothy struggled to sit up, her voice rising with desperation. "Marcus, please, you have to listen to me. She's been hurting me, starving me, drugging me to make me seem worse than I am. She's planning to steal from us, to put me in a home and take all the money." "Mom, your dementia—" "I don't have severe dementia. She's been giving me extra medication to make me confused, to make me seem incompetent." Dorothy could hear the hysteria creeping into her own voice and knew exactly how it sounded. Desperate, delusional, paranoid. Exactly how Vivian wanted her to sound. Marcus looked at Vivian, who had her face buried in her hands now, shoulders shaking with perfectly performed sobs. "I'm so sorry, Marcus," Vivian whispered through her fingers. "I know how hard this is. I know you don't want to face it. But we need to accept the facts. Your mother needs more care than I can provide. She needs professional help. A facility with trained staff who can keep her safe." "No," Dorothy said, reaching for Marcus with desperate hands. "No, please, don't believe her. Look at my face. Look at the bruises on my arms. She did this. She hurt me." Marcus moved closer, and Dorothy saw the moment he noticed the marks on her skin. Dark purple fingerprints on her wrists. a yellowing bruise on her cheek from yesterday's slap. Hope flared in her chest like a match in the dark. "Vivian," he said quietly, his voice tight. "What are these bruises from?" "She falls, Marcus, almost every day, sometimes multiple times. I try to catch her, but she's so unsteady on her feet. The dementia affects her balance, her spatial awareness. Yesterday, when she tried to hit me with the cane, she lost her balance, and I grabbed her to keep her from falling. That's probably where the wrist bruises came from. I was trying to save her from hurting herself worse." "I don't fall," Dorothy said desperately, her voice breaking. "She grabs me, she pushes me, she kicked my wheelchair 2 days ago, she slapped me. She's been starving me, Marcus. When's the last time you actually looked at me? I've lost 15 pounds in 2 months. But she could see it in Marcus's eyes. The doubt. The pain of having to choose between his mother and his fiancée. And underneath it all, the terrible suspicion that his mother really was losing her mind. That the woman who raised him was disappearing into dementia and paranoia. "I think," Marcus said carefully, his voice thick with emotion, "we need to call your doctor, get you evaluated properly, maybe adjust your medications." "Of course," Vivian said immediately, wiping her eyes. "Whatever you think is best. I just want her to get the help she needs." "No," Dorothy whispered, feeling everything slip away. "No, Marcus, please don't do this. Please believe me. I'm your mother. I'm telling you the truth." "Mom, I'm trying to help you." Marcus's voice broke, and Dorothy saw tears in his eyes. "If Vivian's been hurting you, we'll find out. The doctor will examine you, document everything. We'll get to the bottom of this, okay? I promise." Dorothy wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the truth would come out, that justice would prevail, that her son would see through Vivian's lies. But she'd seen how good Vivian was at lying, at manipulating, at making herself the victim, while Dorothy looked like the crazy old woman crying wolf. That night, back in her own bedroom, with Marcus home, lying in bed while she listened to him and Vivian talking downstairs, Dorothy made a decision that would change everything. She couldn't wait 2 more days for the doctor's appointment. Vivian would coach her, drug her extra that morning, make sure Dorothy seemed as confused and unreliable as possible. The doctor would believe Vivian. They always believed the young, beautiful, articulate caregiver over the elderly patient with dementia. Unless Dorothy did something so drastic, so undeniable, that no one could ignore it. She waited until the house was dark and quiet, until she heard Marcus's snoring from down the hall. Then she pulled herself from bed and crawled to her dresser, moving as silently as possible. In the bottom drawer, hidden beneath sweaters she hadn't worn in years, was something she'd put there 6 weeks ago during a moment of clarity. A small, digital recorder. She'd bought it online during one of Vivian's rare trips out, had it delivered to her old friend Margaret's house, retrieved it during a doctor's appointment when Vivian had left her alone in the waiting room for 10 minutes. Dorothy had been recording for 6 weeks. Every threat, every cruel word, every moment of abuse when she'd managed to activate it without Vivian noticing. Hours of evidence. Proof that she wasn't crazy, wasn't confused, wasn't making it up. She pulled it out now, held it in her shaking hands, and made the hardest decision of her life. She had to get this to Marcus. But Vivian would be watching her every move now, monitoring every conversation, controlling access to her son. There was only one way to ensure the truth came out, only one place Vivian couldn't reach. Dorothy looked at the recorder, then at the glass of water on her nightstand that Vivian had left there, probably laced with sedatives. The recorder was small, just barely small enough. Her hands shook as she wrapped it in plastic wrap from the bathroom, sealed it with medical tape she'd hidden in her pillowcase weeks ago. Made it waterproof, she hoped. Made it smooth enough to swallow without it getting stuck. "Forgive me, Marcus," she whispered, thinking of her son, of what this would put him through, of the horror and guilt he would feel. But it's the only way. Then she tilted her head back and placed the recorder on her tongue. It took her 3 tries. The first 2 times, she gagged and couldn't do it, her body's natural reflex fighting against her. But on the 3rd try, she forced it down, swallowing hard, drinking the entire glass of water to help it pass. The pain was immediate and excruciating. The device lodged in her throat, and Dorothy gagged violently, grabbing her neck, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't breathe, couldn't swallow, couldn't do anything but panic as her vision started to go dark around the edges. Then, finally, with one more huge swallow that felt like it was tearing her throat apart, the recorder passed down into her esophagus. Dorothy collapsed back on the bed, sweating and shaking and gasping for air. What had she just done? What if it got stuck? What if it perforated something? What if she died right here in this bed, and Vivian found her in the morning and destroyed the evidence before anyone knew? But the pain in her stomach, sharp and constant, reminded her that the recorder was there, safe, protected inside her own body where Vivian couldn't find it, couldn't destroy it, couldn't explain it away. Tomorrow, she would make sure everyone knew it was there. Tomorrow, she would save herself or die trying. The morning came too soon. Dorothy woke to Vivian standing over her bed, arms crossed, eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Marcus left for the office early," Vivian said coldly. "Some emergency meeting he couldn't miss. Which means you and I need to have a serious conversation about your behavior last night. Making wild accusations, trying to turn him against me, making me look like some kind of abuser. That was very, very stupid, Dorothy." Dorothy's stomach cramped around the recorder, pain radiating through her abdomen in waves that made her nauseous. But she kept her face as neutral as possible, didn't let Vivian see the agony. "I won't do it again," she lied, her voice steady despite the pain. "No, you won't, because I've decided we're accelerating our timeline." Vivian sat on the edge of the bed, her weight making the mattress dip. "I called your doctor this morning. Told him you had a violent psychotic episode last night. He's recommending immediate psychiatric evaluation at Mercy Heights." "That's the state facility, Dorothy. The one for indigent patients. The one with bars on the windows." Dorothy's blood turned to ice. "Marcus would never agree to that." "Marcus already did. I called him at his meeting, crying, said you'd tried to hurt me again, that I was afraid for my safety. He signed the admittance papers electronically 20 minutes ago." Vivian smiled, and it was the cruelest thing Dorothy had ever seen. "By the end of the day, you'll be in a locked ward, and Marcus will be so grateful to me for handling such a difficult situation with such grace." "He won't let you," Dorothy gasped, the pain in her stomach getting worse. "When he sees that place, when he visits me there." "Who says he'll visit?" "I'll tell him you don't want to see him, that seeing him agitates you, that the doctors recommend limiting contact. By the time he realizes what's happened, if he ever does, you'll have been there so long that getting you out will be nearly impossible." Vivian stood, smoothing her skirt. "You lose, old woman. I win. And there's nothing you can do about it." The moment Vivian left the room, Dorothy knew she had minutes, not hours. The ambulance would be coming soon to take her away, and once she was in that facility, drugged and locked up, no one would ever believe her. She grabbed her cell phone from where Vivian had carelessly left it on the dresser, probably thinking Dorothy was too confused to use it properly. She dialed 911 with shaking fingers. "911, what's your emergency?" "My name is Dorothy Wellington," Dorothy said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the pain radiating through her entire body. "I'm 71 years old, and I need an ambulance immediately. I live at 2847 Magnolia Drive in Buckhead. I've swallowed something, and I'm in severe pain. But that's not the real emergency." "Ma'am, what did you swallow? Is it medication? A household chemical?" "Evidence," Dorothy said, the word coming out clear and strong. Evidence that my son's fiancée has been abusing me for months. It's a recording device. It's inside me now, where she can't destroy it, where she can't make it disappear. And I need help getting it out before she tries to stop me. There was a pause on the line, and Dorothy could practically hear the operator trying to decide if she was dealing with a mental health crisis or a genuine emergency. Ma'am, I'm dispatching an ambulance to your location now. Can you tell me more about this recording device? What kind is it? A small digital recorder, about the size of a USB drive. I wrapped it in plastic to protect it. It has hours of recordings on it, proof of everything she's done to me. Dorothy's voice got stronger, more urgent. But please, you have to hurry. She's planning to have me committed to a psychiatric facility today. She's already got the papers signed. If she succeeds, no one will ever believe me. Please. The ambulance is 2 minutes away, ma'am. Stay on the line with me. Are you having difficulty breathing? Any chest pain? No chest pain, but my stomach. It hurts. It hurts so much. Dorothy heard Vivian's footsteps on the stairs, coming fast. She's coming. Whatever she tells you, whatever she says about me being confused or demented, don't believe her, please. I am of sound mind. I know exactly what I've done and why. Vivian burst through the door, her face a mask of fury. Who are you talking to? Give me that phone right now! Dorothy held the phone tighter, spoke louder. My name is Dorothy Wellington. I am 71 years old. I am of sound mind. I swallowed evidence to protect it from destruction. The woman trying to take this phone from me is Vivian Chase, and she has been systematically abusing me, drugging me, and planning to steal from my family. Everything is on the recording inside me. Everything. You crazy bitch! Vivian lunged for the phone, but Dorothy held on with strength she didn't know she still had. Ma'am, the ambulance is pulling up to your house now, the operator said. Officers are also en route. Hold on. Sirens wailed outside, getting closer, getting louder, the most beautiful sound Dorothy had ever heard. Vivian froze, the color draining from her face as she realized what was happening. What did you do? What the hell did you do? Dorothy met her eyes, and for the first time in months, she didn't look away, didn't flinch, didn't cower. I saved myself, Dorothy said quietly. And now everyone is going to hear what you really are. The sirens were right outside now, car doors slamming, footsteps running up the walkway, someone pounding on the front door. Police, open up! Vivian's hands were shaking, her perfect composure shattered completely. You're insane! You're a demented old woman, and no one will believe you. No one. They'll believe the recordings, Dorothy said. Every word you said, every threat you made, every time you hurt me. It's all there, Vivian. All of it. The front door crashed open downstairs. Heavy footsteps thundered through the house. Up here, Dorothy called out, her voice stronger than it had been in months. We're up here! 2 paramedics and 3 police officers burst into the room. Vivian immediately switched modes, her face crumpling, tears flowing. Oh, thank God you're here, she sobbed. She's having another episode. She called 911 claiming she swallowed something, but she's confused. She has dementia. I'm her caregiver. This happens sometimes when she doesn't take her medication. But one of the officers, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, moved past Vivian and knelt beside Dorothy's bed. Mrs. Wellington? I'm Officer Hayes. Can you tell me what happened? I swallowed a digital recorder, Dorothy said clearly, looking directly at the officer. It has 6 weeks of recordings on it, documenting the abuse I've suffered at the hands of that woman. I swallowed it to protect the evidence because she was planning to have me committed to a psychiatric facility today. And I knew once I was there, no one would ever believe me. Officer Hayes studied Dorothy's face, then looked at the bruises on her arms, the ones on her wrists. Her expression hardened. Ma'am, we're going to get you to a hospital. They'll remove the device safely and preserve the evidence. Can you tell me when you swallowed it? Last night, around midnight. I've been in pain ever since, but I needed to make sure it stayed down until help arrived. One of the paramedics, a young man with gentle hands, began taking Dorothy's vital signs. Ma'am, we need to transport you immediately. If there's a foreign object in your stomach, it could cause serious damage. This is ridiculous, Vivian said, her voice rising. She's confused. She's delusional. Officer, I have guardianship papers being drawn up. She's not competent to make decisions about her own care. Are those papers finalized and filed with the court? Officer Hayes asked sharply. Well, no, not yet, but then Mrs. Wellington is legally competent to make her own medical decisions. Ma'am, do you want to go to the hospital? Yes, Dorothy said firmly. And I want this woman kept away from me. I want her investigated. I want justice. She's manipulating you. Vivian's voice went shrill, desperate. She's a sick old woman who's angry that I'm marrying her son. This is all vindictive lies. Then you won't mind if we listen to those recordings once they're retrieved? Officer Hayes said calmly. If they prove she's lying, you'll be cleared. If they prove you're lying, you'll be charged. Fair enough? Vivian's face went from red to white in an instant. The paramedics loaded Dorothy onto a stretcher, moving quickly but carefully. As they carried her down the stairs, Dorothy saw neighbors gathering on the lawn, drawn by the sirens and the police cars. And there, scattered across the front yard like forgotten wishes, were her paper airplanes. 23 desperate pleas for help that no one had found. But it didn't matter now. Help had come anyway. As the ambulance doors closed, Dorothy caught one last glimpse of Vivian standing in the doorway, her perfect mask completely shattered, fear naked on her face. And Dorothy smiled. She'd done it. She'd saved herself. And now, finally, the truth would come out. The ambulance ride to Mercy General Hospital took 12 minutes. But to Dorothy, strapped to the gurney with an oxygen mask over her face, it felt like hours. Every bump in the road sent fresh waves of pain through her stomach. The recorder shifted inside her, a constant reminder of what she'd done, what she'd had to do. BP is 140/90, the paramedic said, checking the monitor. Heart rate elevated but steady. Ma'am, can you rate your pain on the scale of 1 to 10? 8, Dorothy gasped. Maybe 9. The paramedic, whose name tag read Jenkins, leaned closer. Mrs. Wellington, I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there any chance this recording device could perforate your stomach lining? Do you know if it has sharp edges? I wrapped it, plastic wrap and medical tape. Made it as smooth as I could. Dorothy's voice cracked. I had to. She was going to make me disappear. She already had the papers signed to put me in a psychiatric facility today. Jenkins glanced at his partner, a younger woman driving. Did you report this abuse before today? Who would I report it to? She isolated me, fired my housekeeper, controlled my phone access, made me seem crazy to my own son. Dorothy closed her eyes against tears. I had to create evidence she couldn't destroy. This was the only way. You're incredibly brave, Jenkins said quietly. We're almost there. The ER team is ready for you. The emergency room doors burst open, and suddenly Dorothy was surrounded by people in scrubs, all moving fast, all talking at once. 71-year-old female, intentional foreign body ingestion. Small digital recorder, approximately 1 inch by 2 inches. Patient alert and oriented, ×3. Vitals stable, but elevated. Get her to imaging immediately. I want X-rays and a CT scan before we do anything else. Dorothy grabbed the arm of the doctor leaning over her. Please, don't let her in here. Don't let Vivian Chase near me. She'll try to take the recorder. She'll try to have me declared incompetent. The doctor, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair, met Dorothy's eyes. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen. No one gets near you without your explicit permission. Do you understand? You're safe here. My son, Marcus Wellington, he doesn't know the truth yet. When he gets here, she'll have convinced him I'm insane. You have to get that recorder out before she can stop you. We will. But first, we need to see exactly where it is and make sure removing it won't cause more damage. Dr. Chen squeezed Dorothy's hand. Trust me, we're going to help you. The X-ray showed the recorder lodged in Dorothy's stomach, exactly where she'd felt it sitting for the past 10 hours. The imaging tech, a young man who kept shooting Dorothy's sympathetic looks, printed the images and rushed them to Dr. Chen. It's intact, Dr. Chen announced, studying the films. No perforation, no signs of internal bleeding, but we need to remove it soon. The plastic wrap won't hold forever, and if stomach acid eats through it, the electronics could leak battery acid. How soon? Dorothy asked. I'm calling in our best gastroenterologist, Dr. Marcus Bellamy. He can do an endoscopic retrieval, which means no surgery. We'll sedate you, go down your throat with a scope, and pull it out. 30 minutes, maybe less. No sedation. Dorothy's voice was firm. I need to be awake. I need to see you retrieve it and hand it directly to the police. If I'm unconscious, Vivian could claim anything. She could say I imagined it, that there was nothing there. Dr. Chen hesitated. Mrs. Wellington, the procedure will be uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. I've endured worse. I'll endure this. Please, I need to be awake. 20 minutes later, Dr. Marcus Bellamy arrived, a tall black man in his early 40s with kind eyes and steady hands. He sat beside Dorothy's bed and explained the procedure in detail. I'll use a flexible endoscope with a camera and a grasping tool. You'll feel pressure in your throat, significant discomfort, probably nausea. But if you can stay still and breathe through your nose, I can have it out in less than 5 minutes. Are you absolutely sure you want to be awake for this? Completely sure. Officer Hayes is here, right? As if summoned, Officer Ramona Hayes appeared in the doorway. Right here, Mrs. Wellington. I'll be documenting everything. The moment that recorder comes out, it goes into an evidence bag. Chain of custody will be perfect. My son, Dorothy said, her voice breaking. Has anyone called my son? He's on his way, Hayes said. The woman, Vivian Chase, called him. Told him you were having a psychotic break, that you'd harmed yourself. He's driving from his office now. Dorothy's heart sank. She'll get to him first. She'll make me sound crazy before I can defend myself. Then we better work fast, Dr. Bellamy said. Let's get that evidence out of you. The procedure room was cold and sterile. Dorothy lay on her side, throat sprayed with numbing solution that tasted like bitter chemicals. Dr. Bellamy positioned the endoscope at her lips. Deep breath through your nose, Mrs. Wellington. Here we go. The scope slid down her throat, and Dorothy gagged violently, her body's natural reflex screaming at her to reject this intrusion. But she forced herself still, breathing through her nose like he'd said, tears streaming down her face. I see it, Dr. Bellamy said, his voice calm and focused. Positioning the grasper now. Mrs. Wellington, you're doing great, just a little longer. Dorothy felt the tool moving inside her stomach, felt pressure and pulling that made her want to scream. But she bit down on the mouthguard they'd given her and endured. Got it. Pulling back now. Stay with me. The recorder moved up her esophagus, back through her throat. Dorothy gagged again, harder this time, her whole body convulsing. But then it was out, and Dr. Bellamy was holding it up, still wrapped in its plastic cocoon. Officer Hayes, if you'll do the honors? Hayes stepped forward with an evidence bag, photographing the recorder from every angle before Dr. Bellamy placed it carefully inside. She sealed it, signed it, documented the time and date. Evidence secured, Hayes said. Mrs. Wellington, you did it! Dorothy collapsed back on the bed, throat raw, stomach aching, but feeling lighter than she had in months.
It's out. It's safe. She can't destroy it now.
No one can, Hayes confirmed. This is going straight to our tech lab. We'll have it analyzed and the recordings extracted within hours. The door to the procedure room burst open. Marcus Wellington stood there, his face a mask of confusion and fear. And behind him, looking perfectly distraught, was Vivian. "Mom, what happened? What did you do?" Marcus rushed to Dorothy's side.
Marcus,
Dorothy's voice was hoarse from the procedure, weak, and she saw Vivian's eyes light up with triumph. "She swallowed something, Marcus," Vivian said, her voice breaking beautifully. "Just like I told you, she's having a complete breakdown. The doctors had to remove a foreign object from her stomach. She's delusional, dangerous to herself." "The foreign object was a digital recorder," Officer Hayes interrupted, stepping between Vivian and the bed, "containing evidence of systematic abuse. Miss Chase, I'm going to need you to come down to the station for questioning." Vivian's face went white, then red. "This is insane. She's a sick old woman who's angry I'm marrying her son. This is all fabricated." "The recordings will tell us that," Hayes said calmly. "If they prove you're innocent, you have nothing to worry about. But if they prove Mrs. Wellington's allegations, you'll be facing serious charges." Marcus looked between his mother and his fiancée, his expression torn. "Mom, what's on those recordings?" Dorothy reached for his hand, with her own trembling one. "The truth, baby. Everything she's done to me for the past 6 weeks. Every threat, every time she hurt me, every plan she made to steal from us. It's all there." "She's lying!" Vivian's composure cracked completely. "Marcus, you know she has dementia. You know she gets confused." "This is all in her head." "Then the recordings will show that," Officer Hayes repeated. "Mr. Wellington, I'm going to need you to step out while we process this evidence. Your mother needs rest, and we need to preserve the integrity of this investigation." "I'm not leaving my mother," Marcus said, his voice firm. "I'm not asking you to leave the hospital. Just give us some space to work. You can wait in the family room down the hall." Marcus squeezed Dorothy's hand. "I'll be right outside, Mom. Right outside." As he turned to leave, Vivian grabbed his arm. "Marcus, you can't seriously believe her. After everything I've done for her, for us." Marcus pulled his arm free, and Dorothy saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Doubt. Finally, after all this time, doubt about the woman he'd planned to marry. "I need to hear those recordings," he said quietly. "I need to hear the truth." The family waiting room felt like a cage. Marcus paced back and forth, his mind racing. His mother had swallowed a recording device, had put herself in danger, had endured a medical procedure while awake, all to preserve evidence. That wasn't the action of someone delusional. That was the action of someone desperate. Vivian sat in the corner, phone in hand, frantically texting. Marcus moved closer, close enough to see over her shoulder. "Delete everything. Get the offshore accounts closed. Lawyer up now." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. "Who are you texting?" Vivian jumped, nearly dropping the phone. "No one, just my sister. I'm upset, Marcus. Your mother just accused me of horrible things." "Let me see the phone." "What? No! Marcus, you're acting crazy." "Let me see the phone, Vivian." His voice was steel. "Right now." "I don't have to show you anything. This is my private—" Marcus grabbed the phone from her hand. The text thread was open. Not to her sister, to someone named D, with a 347 area code. New York. "Delete everything. Get the offshore accounts closed. Lawyer up now." And the response. "Already done. Told you that old bat would crack eventually. Get out of there." Marcus scrolled up, found weeks of messages, plans, strategies, financial account numbers he recognized as his mother's. Transfer another 50,000. He's too busy to notice. She tried to call him today. Had to take the phone. 2 more months and we're clear. Then we disappear. Marcus looked up at Vivian, and she must have seen something in his face because she stood, backing toward the door. Marcus, I can explain. Those messages, they're not what they look like. Who is D? A friend, just a friend. You've been stealing from my mother. From me. Marcus's voice was shaking. Planning to disappear with the money. This whole time, everything. It was all a con. No, Marcus, I love you. You don't even know what love is. Marcus handed the phone to Officer Hayes, who had appeared in the doorway. Here's your evidence. Text messages detailing financial theft and conspiracy. Hayes took the phone, scanning the messages, her expression hardening. Vivian Chase, you're under arrest for elder abuse, financial exploitation, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You can't do this. Vivian's voice went shrill. Marcus, don't let them do this. I'm your fiancé. You were my fiancé. Marcus pulled off the engagement ring he'd been wearing, the one that matched hers. Now you're just someone who hurt my mother. As Hayes led Vivian away in handcuffs, the woman's perfect mask shattered completely. She screamed obscenities, threats, promises of lawsuits. But Marcus didn't look back. He walked straight to his mother's room. Dorothy was sitting up in bed, throat still raw but eyes clear. When she saw Marcus, tears spilled over. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. Marcus knelt beside her bed, taking both her hands in his. No, Mom. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't see it. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I'm sorry I chose her over you. You loved her. That's not a crime. I should have loved you more. Should have paid attention. Should have seen the signs. Marcus's voice broke. How long, Mom? How long were you suffering while I was blind? 6 months. Since 2 weeks after she moved in. 6 months. Marcus closed his eyes against the pain. 6 months of his mother being abused in her own home while he traveled the world, building his business, planning his wedding. The recordings, Dorothy said. You need to hear them. Not because I want to hurt you, but because you need to understand what she really is, what she was planning. Officer Hayes returned an hour later with a laptop. Mr. Wellington, Mrs. Wellington, the tech team has extracted the audio files. There are 47 separate recordings, totaling just over 6 hours. Are you ready? Marcus looked at his mother. Are you? Dorothy nodded. Play them. The first recording was Vivian's voice, cold and harsh, nothing like the warm tone Marcus knew. You disgust me. Sitting there like some helpless infant. Do you have any idea how pathetic you are? Marcus flinched. That was his Vivian. His beautiful, charming Vivian, speaking to his mother like she was garbage. The recordings continued. Threats, slaps, Marcus could hear through the audio. His mother's quiet crying. Vivian's plans to institutionalize Dorothy, to steal from her accounts, to make Marcus think his mother was losing her mind. He'll believe me. He always does. He's so blinded by love and sex that he can't see I'm using him. Marcus had to leave the room twice to compose himself, to process the fact that the woman he'd planned to spend his life with was a predator who'd seen his mother as an obstacle and him as a bank account. When the final recording ended, Marcus sat in silence for a long moment. I brought her into our home, he finally said. I gave her access to you. I trusted her. I failed you in every possible way. You trusted someone you loved, Dorothy said gently. That's not failure, Marcus. That's being human. She was going to make you disappear. She was going to put you in some horrible facility and drain our accounts and vanish. And I would have let her. I would have believed every lie. But you didn't, because I fought back. And you listened. Eventually, you listened. Marcus looked at his mother, really looked at her. She'd lost weight, he could see that now. Her cheek had a fading bruise he'd somehow missed. Her wrists showed finger marks. Evidence had been there all along, and he'd been too busy, too trusting, too blind to see it. "Never again," he said. "I swear to you, Mom, never again will I let anyone hurt you. Never again will I choose anyone over you." Dorothy smiled, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen in months. "I know, baby. I know." 2 days later, Detective Ramona Hayes sat across from Vivian Chase in an interrogation room. Vivian's lawyer, an expensive-suited man named Gerald Morrison, sat beside her. "My client has nothing to say without immunity," Morrison announced. Hayes smiled coldly. "Your client is facing 15 years minimum. Elder abuse, assault, battery, financial exploitation, conspiracy to commit fraud. The recordings alone are enough to convict. The text messages seal the deal. Immunity is off the table." "Then we're done here." Morrison started to stand.
Wait.
Vivian's voice was small, defeated.
What if I cooperate? What if I tell you everything?
"Vivian, I strongly advise."
I'm going to prison anyway. I know that. But maybe if I talk, they'll reduce the sentence.
Hayes leaned forward. "Tell me about your partner, the one you were texting, D." Vivian's hands shook.
Damien Cross.
"We've been running this con for 5 years. Find wealthy men with elderly parents. Get close. Gain trust. Isolate the parent. Drain the accounts. Disappear before anyone notices." "How many victims?" "4 before Dorothy. But none of them reported it. They were too embarrassed, too confused. We always chose ones with cognitive decline, so no one would believe them if they did talk." "But Dorothy was different," Hayes said. "Dorothy was smarter than I thought. Stronger. I underestimated her." Vivian laughed bitterly. "Ironic, right? I picked her because I thought she'd be easy, weak, forgettable. Turns out she's the one who finally brought me down." Hayes felt a surge of respect for Dorothy Wellington. "Where's Damien Cross now?" "Probably on a plane to somewhere without extradition. He texted me to run, to leave Marcus and disappear. But I couldn't. I thought I could still salvage it, still convince Marcus his mother was crazy." Vivian's face crumpled. "I actually thought he'd choose me." "Why did you do this? The money?" "Money, power, the thrill of it. Do you know what it's like to make people believe whatever you want them to believe? To control their reality? It's addictive." Vivian looked up, and Hayes saw no remorse in her eyes, only regret at being caught. "I would have made it too, if that old woman hadn't swallowed that damn recorder." Hayes closed her notebook. "You're done, and Dorothy Wellington is free." At the hospital, Dorothy was being discharged. Her throat was healed, her stomach pain gone. The recorder was safely in evidence lockup, and Vivian was facing enough charges to keep her in prison well into her 50s. Marcus helped his mother into the wheelchair for the ride down to the car, but Dorothy waved him off. "I can walk. I want to walk." And she did, slowly, with Marcus's arm for support, but on her own 2 feet. Out of the hospital, into the sunlight, into freedom. "Where do you want to go, Mom? Home? Or somewhere else? We can go anywhere, do anything." Dorothy thought for a moment.
Home. I want to go home. Our home. And I want to make it ours again. Clean out every trace of her. Start fresh.
"Whatever you want." They drove through Atlanta in silence, comfortable now, healing. As they pulled into the driveway of the Magnolia Drive mansion, Dorothy saw something that made her smile. There, scattered across the front lawn, were her paper airplanes. 23 desperate pleas for help that no one had found in time. Marcus saw them too.
What are those?
"Hope,"
Dorothy said. 23 pieces of hope that I threw when I thought no one was listening. But it turns out someone was listening. I just had to scream loud enough. Marcus gathered the paper airplanes carefully, smoothing out each one. On every page, his mother's handwriting. Help me. I'm being held against my will. I should have known, he whispered. These were here for days. I drove past them and never saw them. You see them now. That's what matters. Dorothy took one of the airplanes, held it up to the light. These taught me something important, Marcus. Sometimes help doesn't come when you ask quietly. Sometimes you have to swallow the evidence, call 911, fight for yourself. Sometimes you have to be loud. Marcus helped his mother inside, and together they began the work of reclaiming their home. Every photo of Vivian went into the trash. Every gift she'd brought, every trace of her presence, removed and discarded. In Vivian's old closet, Dorothy found something that made her blood run cold. A notebook. Inside were detailed plans, not just for Dorothy and Marcus, but for future targets. Names, addresses, financial profiles. A list of wealthy men with elderly parents who had cognitive issues. She was hunting, Dorothy said, showing Marcus the notebook. We weren't the end. We were just one stop on a long con. Marcus called Officer Hayes immediately. The notebook became evidence, and Hayes began contacting the other names on the list, warning them, protecting them from what Dorothy had endured. That evening, Dorothy and Marcus sat in the garden, the place where Dorothy had spent so many terrified hours under Vivian's control. I want to do something, Dorothy said. I want to help other people like me. Other elderly people being abused by caregivers, by family, by people they trust. Like what? A foundation, support groups, a hotline. Something so that when someone is suffering like I was, they have somewhere to turn. Someone who will believe them. Marcus pulled out his phone. Consider it done. The Dorothy Wellington Foundation for Elder Protection. We'll fund it fully. Make it national. Make sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else. Dorothy smiled. Not the Dorothy Wellington Foundation. Call it something else. Call it the Recorder Project. The Recorder Project? Because sometimes the evidence is inside us. Sometimes we have to find creative ways to be heard. Sometimes we have to swallow our truth to protect it. Dorothy took her son's hand. And I want every elder who's suffering to know that their voice matters, that someone will listen, that they're worth fighting for. Marcus squeezed her hand. The Recorder Project it is. 3 months later, Dorothy stood in front of a crowd of 200 people at the first Recorder Project support group meeting. Survivors of elder abuse, advocates, social workers, medical professionals. My name is Dorothy Wellington, she said, her voice strong and clear. And I'm a survivor. The room erupted in applause. Dorothy's words hung in the air for a moment before the applause swelled again, louder this time, and she saw tears on faces throughout the crowd. Survivors who understood, who'd lived their own versions of her nightmare. For 6 months, I was a prisoner in my own home, Dorothy continued, gripping the podium to keep her hands from shaking. The woman my son loved, the woman I welcomed into our family, she hurt me, starved me, drugged me, made me believe I was losing my mind. And the worst part? I stayed silent. I was too ashamed, too scared, too convinced that no one would believe a confused old woman over a beautiful young caregiver. A woman in the third row stood up. She looked about Dorothy's age, her arm in a sling. How did you finally speak up? How did you find the courage? Dorothy met her eyes. I didn't find courage. I found desperation. When you realize the choice is between dying silent or dying loud, you choose loud. Every time. The woman nodded, tears streaming down her face, and sat back down. Marcus watched from the side of the room.
his chest tight with pride and guilt in equal measure.
3 months since Vivian's arrest, and he still woke up some nights drowning in shame. How had he missed it? How had he been so blind? After the meeting, a line of people formed to talk to Dorothy, each one with their own story. A man whose brother was stealing his medication. A woman whose daughter-in-law locked her in the basement. An elderly couple whose son had drained their retirement accounts. "What do I do?" an 80-year-old man asked Dorothy, his voice shaking.
"My grandson. He's all I have left. If I report him, I'll have nobody."
Dorothy took his hand. "You'll have us. You'll have this community. And you'll have your dignity back. That's worth more than a grandson who hurt you." By the time the last person left, it was past 9. Marcus helped Dorothy to the car, noticed how she leaned on him more heavily than usual. "You overdid it, Mom. You need to rest."
"I'm fine. Just tired."
But her voice was thin, stretched. "You're not fine. You haven't been sleeping. I hear you up at night, pacing." Dorothy didn't answer right away. They drove in silence for several blocks before she finally spoke. "I have nightmares. Every night. I'm back in that room, that windowless room where she locked me. I can't get out. I'm screaming, but no sound comes. And she's standing there, watching, smiling." Marcus pulled the car over, turned to face his mother. "Have you talked to anyone about this? A therapist?" "I'm strong enough to handle it."
Being strong doesn't mean handling everything alone, Mom. That's what got you into this situation in the first place. You tried to be strong, tried to protect me from the truth, and it nearly killed you. Dorothy's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to be weak again. I can't be weak again. Asking for help isn't weakness. You taught me that when I was 8 years old and Dad died. Remember? You sat me down and said, 'Marcus, sometimes the strongest thing we can do is admit we can't do it alone. You need to take your own advice.'" The next morning, Dorothy sat in Dr. Patricia Morrison's office. The therapist was in her 60s, warm-eyed, patient. She'd specialized in trauma survivors for 30 years. "Tell me about the nightmares," Dr. Morrison said. Dorothy described them. The locked room, the silence, Vivian's face, the crushing weight of helplessness. "What you're experiencing is PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It's common in abuse survivors, especially elder abuse survivors who've been isolated and controlled." "I thought I was past this. The trial is over. Vivian is in prison. I should be fine." Trauma doesn't work on a schedule, Dorothy. Your body and mind went through months of survival mode. Now that you're safe, they're processing what happened. The nightmares, the insomnia, the hypervigilance, these are all normal responses to abnormal circumstances. How do I make them stop? We work through them, together. We process what happened. We give you tools to manage the triggers. We rebuild your sense of safety. Dr. Morrison leaned forward. "But Dorothy, I need you to understand something. Healing isn't linear. Some days will be better than others. Some days you'll feel strong, and some days you'll feel like you're back in that room. Both are okay. Both are part of the process." That evening, Marcus came home from work to find his mother sitting in the kitchen, staring at a piece of paper. He recognized it. One of the paper airplanes she'd thrown from her window. Her desperate plea for help that no one had found. "Mom, I keep thinking about all the other people out there right now, throwing their own paper airplanes, screaming silently, waiting for someone to notice." Dorothy looked up at him. "The recorder project is helping, but it's not enough. We need to do more." "What are you thinking?" "Legislation. Real, enforceable laws that protect elderly people from financial exploitation and abuse. Mandatory reporting requirements for medical professionals. Background checks for caregivers. An independent ombudsman office to investigate complaints." Marcus sat down across from her. "That's ambitious. That's state level, maybe federal level reform. So, we aim high. We fight big.
Dorothy's eyes blazed with purpose. Vivian wasn't the first person to do this, Marcus. She told the police she'd run this con on 4 other families before us. 4 other elderly people who suffered and stayed silent because they were too ashamed or scared. How many more are out there we don't know about? Thousands. Tens of thousands. Exactly. So we fight for them. We make noise. We make it impossible to ignore. Dorothy stood, energy flooding back into her voice. I want to testify before the state legislature. I want to tell my story on record. I want to make sure what happened to me leads to real change. Marcus pulled out his phone. I know someone. Senator Patricia Williams. She's been looking for a cause to champion before the next election. Let me make a call. 2 weeks later, Dorothy stood in the Georgia State Capitol building, facing a committee of 12 legislators. The chamber was packed with press, advocates, survivors. Marcus sat in the front row, his hands clasped tight. Senator Williams, a black woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and sharper instincts, called the hearing to order. We're here today to discuss Senate Bill 2847, the Elder Protection and Financial Safety Act. Our first witness is Mrs. Dorothy Wellington, whose story has brought national attention to the crisis of elder abuse. Mrs. Wellington, you have the floor. Dorothy's hands shook as she gripped her prepared statement. Then she set it aside. This needed to come from her heart, not a page. Senators, my name is Dorothy Wellington. I'm 71 years old. 3 months ago, I swallowed a recording device to preserve evidence that I was being abused. I put my life at risk because I knew that without proof, no one would believe me. And that should never be necessary. Ever. She told them everything. The isolation, the drugging, the financial theft, the terror of knowing her own son didn't believe her. The woman who abused me is in prison now. But she told police she'd done this before. 4 times before. And those victims never reported because the system doesn't protect us. It doesn't believe us. It treats elderly people with cognitive decline as unreliable witnesses, even when we're telling the truth. One of the senators, an older white man named Richardson, interrupted. Mrs. Wellington, with all due respect, how do we distinguish between genuine abuse and false accusations from people who are genuinely confused? Dorothy felt anger flash through her. Senator Richardson, do you know what the statistics say? Less than 2% of elder abuse reports are false. Less than 2%. But we treat every elderly person like they're probably lying, and we treat every abuser like they're probably innocent. We have it backwards. But surely family members deserve the benefit of the doubt. My abuser wasn't family. She was a con artist who targeted my son specifically because he had money and an elderly mother with early-stage dementia. She saw vulnerability and she exploited it. And she would have gotten away with it if I hadn't literally swallowed evidence to protect it. Dorothy's voice rose. Is that what we want? Do we want elderly people to have to risk their lives just to be believed? The chamber erupted in applause. Senator Richardson's face reddened, but he said nothing more. Senator Williams smiled slightly. Mrs. Wellington, can you tell us what specific provisions in this bill would have helped you? All of them. The mandatory background checks would have flagged Vivian's previous cons. The financial monitoring requirements would have caught the theft earlier. The independent ombudsman office would have given me somewhere to report that wasn't controlled by the person abusing me. And the mandatory reporter training would have helped my doctors recognize the signs they missed. Thank you, Mrs. Wellington. This committee will take your testimony under advisement. But as Dorothy left the chamber, a young aide rushed up to her. Mrs. Wellington, wait. Senator Williams wants to speak with you privately. In a small office off the main corridor, Senator Williams sat behind a desk covered in files. Mrs. Wellington, your testimony was powerful, compelling, but I need to be honest with you. This bill faces serious opposition.
From who?
The nursing home industry, for one. They don't want independent oversight. The insurance companies don't want mandatory reporting because it'll increase their liability. And frankly, some of my colleagues think elder abuse is a family matter that government shouldn't be involved in. Dorothy felt her hope deflating.
So it won't pass.
I didn't say that. I said it faces opposition, which means we need to fight harder. Williams pulled out a file. I've been doing research. There are 47 other families in Georgia alone who've reported similar situations in the past 5 years. Families where a caregiver or romantic partner isolated an elderly person and drained their finances. And those are just the ones who reported. How many more stayed silent? What are you saying? I'm saying your story is powerful, but it's one story. We need more voices. We need those 47 families to come forward. We need survivors to flood the Capitol with testimony. We need to make this impossible to ignore. Dorothy thought about the support group, about all those faces, all those stories.
I can get you voices. Give me 2 weeks.
Marcus was waiting in the car when Dorothy emerged from the Capitol building. How'd it go? We have work to do. A lot of work. Dorothy pulled out her phone. I need you to call every media contact you have. Local news, national news, I don't care. I want to tell my story everywhere. I want to put a face on this issue that people can't ignore.
Mom, are you sure? That means opening yourself up to scrutiny, to criticism, to people who'll say you're lying or exaggerating.
Let them say it. I swallowed a recorder, Marcus. I have 6 hours of audio proof. Let them try to discredit that. The media blitz started 3 days later. Dorothy appeared on the local Atlanta evening news, then a national morning show, then a cable news special about elder abuse. Each time, she told her story. Each time, the response was overwhelming. Her phone rang constantly, survivors reaching out, sharing their own stories, advocates asking how they could help, journalists wanting interviews. The Recorder Project's hotline was flooded with calls. But not all the attention was positive. You're just a bitter old woman trying to destroy a young woman's life, one caller screamed into the hotline. My daughter-in-law is nothing like you described, and I'm sick of people like you making caregivers look bad. The hate mail started arriving at Marcus's office. Letters accusing Dorothy of lying, of being vindictive, of trying to get attention. Some were cruel. Some were threatening. Careful, old lady. What happened to you could happen again. Accidents are easy to arrange. Marcus wanted to hire security, wanted to surround his mother with bodyguards. But Dorothy refused. If I hide, if I let them scare me into silence, then Vivian wins, then every abuser wins. No, I'm not hiding anymore. 2 weeks after her testimony, Dorothy stood before a crowd of 300 people at a rally on the Capitol steps. Survivors, advocates, medical professionals, social workers, all demanding change. We are not invisible, Dorothy shouted into the microphone. We are not disposable. We are human beings who deserve dignity, safety, and justice. And we will not be silent anymore. The crowd roared. Signs waved. Believe survivors. Protect our elders. Pass SB 2847. Inside the Capitol, senators were watching, counting votes, calculating political cost. That night, Senator Williams called Dorothy. We have the votes. The bill will pass. Not the full version. Some provisions got watered down. But it's something. It's a start. Dorothy closed her eyes, felt tears sliding down her cheeks. When? Vote is scheduled for next Tuesday. I want you there. I want those senators to look you in the eye when they vote. Tuesday arrived cold and gray. Dorothy wore her best suit, the one she'd bought for Marcus's college graduation 20 years ago. It hung loose on her now, weight she still hadn't gained back, but she stood straight. The Senate chamber was packed, every seat filled. Dorothy sat in the gallery between Marcus and Officer Ramona Hayes, who'd become a friend over the past months. The debate lasted 3 hours. Some senators spoke passionately in favor. Some spoke against, citing costs and concerns about government overreach. But Dorothy noticed they didn't look at her when they spoke against it. They couldn't. Finally, the vote. Senator Williams called the roll. Senator Adams? Aye. Senator Bradley? Aye. Senator Chen? Aye. One by one, the votes came in. Dorothy's heart pounded so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Senator Richardson. A long pause. The man who'd questioned her testimony, who'd suggested elderly people were unreliable. Dorothy held her breath. Aye. The final vote was 37-19. The bill passed. The gallery erupted in cheers. Dorothy felt Marcus's arms around her, felt tears on both their faces. It wasn't everything. Some provisions had been cut, some protections watered down. But it was something. It was hope. Outside the Capitol, reporters swarmed. Dorothy stood on the steps, microphones thrust in her face. Mrs. Wellington, how does it feel to know your story changed state law? Dorothy thought about that question. How did it feel? It felt like validation, like proof that her suffering hadn't been meaningless, like maybe, just maybe, she'd saved someone else from enduring what she'd endured. It feels like I can finally breathe, she said. That night, Dorothy couldn't sleep. But for once, it wasn't nightmares keeping her awake. It was something else. A restlessness. A sense that her work wasn't done. She went downstairs, found Marcus in his home office, working late. Can't sleep either? He asked. I keep thinking about what Vivian said, about the 4 families before us, about how they never reported because they were too ashamed. Dorothy sat down across from him. What if we found them? What if we reached out and let them know they're not alone, that it wasn't their fault? Marcus pulled up the police file on his computer. Detective Hayes gave me their names, part of the investigation. But Mom, these people might not want to be contacted, might not want to relive it. Or they might be waiting for someone to tell them it's okay to talk about it, that they're not crazy or weak or stupid for letting it happen. Marcus printed the list. 4 names, 4 cities, 4 families that Vivian and her partner Damien had destroyed before moving on to Dorothy. We start tomorrow, Dorothy said. The first name on the list was Margaret Chen, age 74, living in Savannah. Dorothy called the number Detective Hayes had provided. An older woman answered, voice cautious. Mrs. Chen, my name is Dorothy Wellington. I'm calling because I believe you and I have something in common. We were both targeted by a woman named Vivian Chase. Silence on the line, then a sharp intake of breath. How did you get this number? I'm the one who finally got her arrested. She's in prison now, facing 15 years. But she told police about previous victims, and your name came up. I wanted to reach out, let you know you weren't alone, that it wasn't your fault. I don't want to talk about this. Margaret's voice shook. My son, he doesn't even know. He thinks his fiancée just left him. I never told him what she did to me. Why not? Because he loved her. Because I didn't want him to know his mother was weak enough to be abused by some young woman. Because I was ashamed. Mrs. Chen, I understand that shame. I felt it too. But keeping silent only protects the people who hurt us. Your son deserves to know the truth. It's been 3 years. What good would it do now?
It would free you, and it might help put her partner away. Damian Cross is still out there, still running cons on other families. If you testify about what happened to you, it strengthens the case against both of them. Another long silence. She took $40,000 from me, told me it was for her sick mother. I gave it to her because she was so kind, so caring. Then one day she was just gone, and my son was heartbroken. I couldn't tell him his grief was based on a lie. Tell him now. I'll be there with you if you want. You don't have to face this alone. 3 days later, Dorothy and Marcus drove to Savannah. Margaret Chen lived in a small house near the historic district, roses climbing the fence. She met them at the door, tiny and frail, eyes red from crying. I told him, she said without preamble. This morning, I told my son everything. How did he react? He cried. He said he was sorry. He said he should have protected me. Margaret's voice broke. Just like you probably told your son. Marcus and Margaret's son, David, sat in the kitchen drinking coffee, while Dorothy and Margaret talked in the living room. The two women circled each other's pain, recognizing it, validating it. She told me I was special, Margaret said, that David was lucky to have such a wonderful mother. She made me feel seen, and then she used that against me. They're good at that, finding our vulnerabilities and exploiting them. I keep thinking about all the warning signs I missed. The questions she asked about my finances. The way she isolated me from my friends. How she convinced David to let her help with my medications. You didn't miss them. She hid them. That's what predators do. Dorothy took Margaret's hand. But here's what I need you to understand. By staying silent, by protecting your son from the truth, you gave her power. You let her win. Are you ready to take that power back? Margaret looked at her son through the kitchen doorway, looked at Marcus. Two good men who'd been deceived, who carried guilt that wasn't theirs to carry. Yes, Margaret said. I'm ready. By the end of the month, Dorothy had contacted all 4 families. All 4 agreed to testify. The case against Damian Cross, who'd been arrested trying to flee to Costa Rica, suddenly became airtight. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for late November. Dorothy sat in the courtroom gallery with Margaret Chen, Robert Patterson from Birmingham, Susan and James Rodriguez from Charleston, and Ellen Whitney from Jacksonville. 5 families, 5 stories, 1 pattern of abuse. Damian Cross sat at the defense table in an expensive suit, looking bored. He was 52, handsome in a practiced way, with silver hair and cold eyes. When Dorothy entered, those eyes flickered to her, and she saw recognition. Hatred. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Amanda Torres, called Dorothy to the stand first. Mrs. Wellington, can you identify the man who conspired with Vivian Chase to abuse you? Dorothy pointed. That's him, Damian Cross. I never met him in person, but I heard his voice on Vivian's phone calls, and I saw his text messages on her phone. He was the mastermind. She was just the weapon. Objection! Cross's lawyer jumped up. Speculation. The witness has no direct knowledge of my client's alleged involvement. I have his text messages, Dorothy said calmly, instructing Vivian to increase my medication, suggesting she move money to offshore accounts he controlled, planning their exit strategy. The lawyer sat down. One by one, the other victims testified. Margaret Chen, voice shaking but steady, describing how Vivian had stolen $40,000 while pretending to care for her dying mother. Robert Patterson, an 80-year-old veteran, explaining how Vivian had convinced his son to sign over power of attorney, then drained his military pension. The Rodriguez couple, married 60 years, telling how Vivian had nearly destroyed their family before their daughter got suspicious.
By the time Ellen Whitney testified about losing her home to foreclosure because Vivian had secretly taken out loans in her name, the jury looked sick.
Cross's lawyer tried to argue that the text messages were taken out of context, that Cross had been manipulated by Vivian, just like everyone else. But the prosecutor had phone records, financial records, a paper trail showing Cross had been running similar cons for 15 years. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Outside the courthouse, Dorothy stood with the other survivors. A reporter approached. "Mrs. Wellington, you've become the face of elder abuse awareness. How does it feel to have helped bring down an entire criminal enterprise?" Dorothy looked at Margaret, at Robert, at Susan and James, at Ellen. "I didn't do this alone. We did this together. And that's the message I want people to hear. You don't have to fight alone. There are others who understand, others who believe you, others who will stand with you." That Christmas, Dorothy hosted a dinner at the Magnolia Drive mansion. Not just family, though Marcus was there with his new girlfriend, a kind woman named Sarah, who worked at the Recorder Project. But also the other survivors, Margaret and David, Robert and his daughter, the Rodriguez family, Ellen and her son. They gathered around the table, this chosen family bound by shared trauma and shared healing, and Dorothy stood to make a toast. 6 months ago, I thought my life was ending. I was trapped, terrified, convinced no one would ever believe me. But I fought back. I found my voice. And in doing so, I found all of you. Dorothy raised her glass. To surviving, to thriving, to making sure no one else has to swallow evidence just to be heard. To being heard, they echoed. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Margaret pulled Dorothy aside. "I want to start a support group in Savannah, like what you're doing in Atlanta. Will you help me?" "Of course. And Robert wants to start one in Birmingham. Ellen in Jacksonville. We're building a network, a community." "A revolution," Margaret said with a slight smile. "A revolution," Dorothy agreed. Late that night, after everyone had gone, Dorothy stood in her bedroom, looking at the 23 paper airplanes she'd framed and hung on her wall. 23 silent screams that no one had heard in time. But people were hearing now. The Recorder Project had expanded to 12 states. The Georgia law had inspired similar legislation in 5 other states, and Dorothy had become something she never expected. A voice for the voiceless. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "My name is Patricia. I'm 68. My daughter's boyfriend has been hurting me. I saw your story on the news. Can you help me?" Dorothy sat down, fingers hovering over the keyboard. 6 months ago, she couldn't have helped, couldn't have done anything but survive. But now? Now she typed, "Yes. Tell me everything. You're safe now. I believe you." Dorothy's fingers flew across her phone keyboard. "Patricia, I need you to tell me where you are right now. Are you safe at this moment?" The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Dorothy's heart pounded. She knew that hesitation, that fear of saying too much, of being overheard. "He's asleep. I'm in the bathroom with the door locked. But I don't have much time." "Okay, listen to me very carefully. Do you have bruises, injuries he's caused?" "Yes, my ribs. He kicked me yesterday when I asked him to leave. My daughter doesn't know. She works nights. He only hurts me when she's gone." Dorothy stood up, started pacing. This was happening right now, not a story from months ago. Right now, this woman was trapped and terrified. "Patricia, I'm going to give you a number. It's a crisis hotline we set up through the Recorder Project. They can send help immediately, but I need to know. Do you want help? Are you ready to tell your daughter the truth?" Longer pause this time. Dorothy could almost feel the woman's terror through the screen.
She loves him. They're getting married next month. If I tell her, she'll think I'm lying. She'll think I'm trying to ruin her happiness like my mother tried to ruin mine. Or she'll thank you for saving her from marrying an abuser. Patricia, listen to me. I stayed silent for 6 months.
6 months of hell because I was afraid my son wouldn't believe me. And you know what? When I finally told him the truth, he believed me. He was devastated that I'd suffered alone. Your daughter deserves the chance to believe you too. What if she doesn't? Then you still spoke your truth. You still protected yourself. But Patricia, every minute you wait, you're in danger. Real danger. I need you to call that hotline, right now. Will you do that? I'm scared. I know, I was scared too, but I called 911, and it saved my life. You can do this. I know you can. The dots appeared one more time. Okay, I'll call. Dorothy waited, phone clutched in her hand, praying this woman would actually make the call. 20 minutes later, her phone rang. The hotline coordinator. Dorothy, we got her. Police are on the way to her house. She's scared, but she's talking. Thank you. Dorothy collapsed onto her bed, adrenaline draining away, leaving her shaking. This was her life now. Crisis calls at midnight. Terrified voices reaching out because they'd seen her story and thought maybe, just maybe, someone would believe them too. The next morning, Dorothy met with Marcus and Sarah at the Recorder Project headquarters, a small office suite they'd rented in downtown Atlanta. The walls were covered with photos of survivors, testimonials, hotline statistics. We got 47 calls yesterday, Sarah said, pulling up the database. 47 people reporting active abuse situations. We're overwhelmed, Dorothy. We need more staff, more resources, more funding. How much? Sarah showed her the spreadsheet. The numbers made Dorothy's head spin. Hiring trained counselors, expanding the hotline hours to 24/7, opening satellite offices in other cities. It would cost hundreds of thousands. We'll get it, Dorothy said. We'll fundraise. We'll apply for grants. We'll make noise until someone listens. Marcus leaned forward. Mom, you're already doing so much. The speaking engagements, the support groups, the legislative work. You're one person. You can't save everyone. Watch me. But Marcus was right, and Dorothy knew it. She was exhausted, running on adrenaline and purpose, barely sleeping, eating only when Marcus forced food in front of her. The nightmares had gotten worse, not better. Every crisis call triggered memories of her own terror. That afternoon, Dorothy had an appointment with Dr. Morrison. She almost canceled, told herself she was too busy, but Marcus physically drove her to the office and waited in the lobby to make sure she went in. You're burning out, Dr. Morrison said bluntly. I can see it. You've channeled your trauma into this cause, which is admirable, but you're not processing what happened to you. You're running from it. I don't have time to process. People need help right now. And you can't help them if you collapse. Dorothy, when's the last time you slept through the night? Dorothy didn't answer. When's the last time you did something just for you? Something that had nothing to do with abuse or advocacy or saving people? That's selfish. There are people suffering. And you're one of them. Dr. Morrison's voice was gentle but firm. You're still suffering, Dorothy. You're just suffering in a different way. You've traded one form of pain for another. At least this pain has purpose. All pain is trying to tell you something. Yours is telling you to slow down, to heal, to let yourself be human instead of a symbol. Dr. Morrison pulled out a prescription pad. I'm prescribing something for the nightmares. And I'm prescribing something else too. 1 week off. Complete break from the Recorder Project, from advocacy, from everything. 1 week where you just exist. I can't do that. You have to, or you will break, and then you can't help anyone.
Dorothy left the office with the prescription in her pocket and anger burning in her chest. Dr. Morrison didn't understand, couldn't understand. Every minute Dorothy rested was a minute someone else suffered. But that night, when she woke screaming from another nightmare, when she found herself sobbing in the shower at 3 in the morning, when she looked in the mirror and saw a ghost staring back, she started to wonder if maybe Dr. Morrison was right. The next day, Patricia called. Not texting this time, actually calling, her voice stronger than Dorothy expected. "I wanted to thank you. The police came. They arrested him. And my daughter, she believed me. She saw the bruises, heard my story, and she believed me." Relief flooded through Dorothy. "I'm so glad. How are you holding up?" "I'm scared. I'm sad for my daughter, but I'm also angry. I'm furious that I let him hurt me for 3 months before I spoke up. I keep thinking about all the times I could have said something. Don't do that to yourself. You spoke up when you were ready. That's what matters. I want to help, like you're doing. I want to make sure other people don't wait as long as I did." Dorothy felt something twist in her chest. Another person joining the cause. Another voice added to the choir. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like weight. "We'd love to have you," Dorothy heard herself say. "We're always looking for volunteers." After the call ended, Dorothy sat staring at her phone. How many Patricias were out there? How many people would reach out tomorrow, next week, next month? And how was she supposed to help them all when she could barely help herself? Marcus found her an hour later, still sitting in the same spot. "Mom, you okay?" "I don't know how to do this. How to be what everyone needs me to be." Marcus sat down beside her. "Then stop trying to be what everyone needs. Just be you. Just be my mom, who survived something terrible and is trying to make sense of it. That's enough." "It's not enough. It'll never be enough." "Why not?" "Because Vivian hurt 4 families before us. Because Damien Cross destroyed lives for 15 years. Because right now, tonight, there are people suffering what I suffered, and I can't save them all. I can't even save myself." The words hung between them. Dorothy had finally said it out loud. The truth she'd been running from for months. "I'm still broken, Marcus. I'm still that scared old woman in the locked room. I'm just better at hiding it now." Marcus pulled her into a hug, and Dorothy let herself cry. Really cry. Not the stoic tears she allowed in support group meetings. Not the controlled emotion she showed reporters. But the ugly, desperate sobs of someone who was drowning and finally admitting it. The next week, Dorothy did something she'd never done before. She said no. A reporter called asking for an interview about a new abuse case in Florida. Dorothy said no. A support group in Tennessee invited her to speak. Dorothy said no. The hotline coordinator asked if she could take a crisis call because the volunteer was overwhelmed. Dorothy said no. Instead, she went to the botanical gardens with Marcus and Sarah. She sat in the sunshine and read a mystery novel that had nothing to do with abuse or advocacy. She made dinner from scratch. Her grandmother's jambalaya recipe she hadn't cooked in years. She called her old friend Margaret, not Margaret Chen, the abuse survivor, but Margaret Davis, who she'd taught school with 40 years ago. And they talked about nothing important for 2 hours. And slowly, incrementally, Dorothy started to feel something she hadn't felt in a year. Peace. On the 5th day of her break, Dorothy received a package. No return address. Inside was a letter, written in shaky handwriting. "Dear Mrs. Wellington, you don't know me, but you saved my life. I saw you on the news 3 months ago talking about your abuse. I was in the same situation. My son's girlfriend was stealing from me, hurting me, making me feel crazy. But I thought I was alone. I thought no one would believe me because I'm 83 and sometimes I forget things. Then I saw you.
I saw your strength, and I found my own. I reported her. She's been arrested. My son believes me, and I'm free. Thank you for being brave enough to speak up. You gave me permission to do the same. With gratitude, Helen Martinez. Dorothy read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. This was why. This was the purpose in the pain. But she also realized something else. She didn't need to save everyone. She just needed to light the way. Other people could walk the path themselves. When her week off ended, Dorothy returned to the Recorder Project with new boundaries. She hired 3 new counselors to handle crisis calls. She trained volunteers to lead support groups in other cities instead of traveling herself. She created a speakers bureau so other survivors could share their stories. I can't be the face of this movement forever, she told Marcus and Sarah at a staff meeting. And I shouldn't be. This isn't about me. It's about every survivor finding their voice.
Sarah pulled up a presentation. Speaking of which, we've been contacted by a documentary filmmaker. She wants to tell your story, but also the stories of Margaret Chen, Robert Patterson, all the survivors. A full picture of elder abuse and recovery. Dorothy's first instinct was to say no, to protect her privacy, her pain. But then she thought about Helen Martinez, about Patricia, about all the invisible people who needed to know they weren't alone. Okay, but on one condition. We don't just show the abuse, we show the healing. We show that survival is possible, that life continues after trauma. The documentary took 6 months to film. Cameras followed Dorothy to support group meetings, legislative hearings, quiet moments at home with Marcus. They interviewed the other survivors, Officer Ramona Hayes, Dr. Chen from the hospital, even Senator Williams. And they interviewed Vivian Chase. Dorothy hadn't seen Vivian since the trial, hadn't wanted to. But the filmmaker convinced her it was important, that seeing the abuser take responsibility could help with closure. The prison interview took place on a gray Tuesday morning. Dorothy sat across from Vivian in the visiting room, a thick pane of glass between them, cameras recording everything. Vivian looked different, older, harder. Prison had stripped away the polish, revealed the emptiness underneath. "Why did you agree to this interview?" Dorothy asked. Vivian shrugged. "Boredom, curiosity, chance to see you again." "Do you regret what you did?" "I regret getting caught." Vivian's eyes were cold. "I don't regret the money, the thrill, the power of making you believe you were crazy." Dorothy felt old anger stirring, but also something new. Pity. "You're 68 years old," Vivian continued. "In 10 years, you'll be dead, forgotten. But I destroyed you. I broke you. That's my legacy." "No," Dorothy said quietly. "Your legacy is 15 years in prison. My legacy is the hundreds of people we've helped through the Recorder Project. The laws we've changed. The voices we've empowered. You tried to silence me, Vivian. Instead, you made me louder." For the first time, something flickered in Vivian's eyes. Not remorse, but recognition that she'd lost. "I spent 6 months being scared of you," Dorothy said. 6 months thinking you were powerful. But you're not. You're just broken. And I forgive you. I don't want your forgiveness. I'm not giving it for you. I'm giving it for me. Because carrying hatred for you is like drinking poison and expecting you to die. I'm done poisoning myself." Dorothy stood up. "Goodbye, Vivian. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, but you won't find it in my nightmares anymore. I'm free of you." Walking out of that prison, Dorothy felt something release in her chest. A knot she'd been carrying for over a year finally loosened.
Marcus was waiting in the car.
How was it?
Necessary. Painful, but necessary. Dorothy looked at her son. I forgave her, not because she deserves it, but because I deserve peace. The documentary premiered at a film festival in New York 8 months later. Dorothy attended with Marcus, Sarah, and all the other survivors featured in the film. They watched their stories unfold on screen, cried together, held each other through the hardest parts. When the credits rolled, the audience stood and applauded for 5 full minutes. Afterward, people swarmed Dorothy. Not just journalists or advocates, but ordinary people who'd seen themselves in her story. My grandmother went through this, a young woman said, tears streaming down her face. But she never told anyone. She died still carrying that secret. Thank you for making sure others don't have to. An elderly man gripped Dorothy's hand. I've been making excuses for my daughter-in-law for 2 years, telling myself the bruises were accidents. The missing money was loans I forgot about. But watching your story, I can't lie to myself anymore. Tomorrow, I'm calling the police. Good, Dorothy said, and then call us. You don't have to face this alone. The documentary went on to win 3 major awards and was picked up by a streaming service. Within weeks, the Recorder Project hotline was receiving calls from across the country, then across the world. Dorothy found herself on the phone with a woman in London, another in Sydney, a man in Toronto. Elder abuse was universal. The silence around it was universal. But now, so was the solution. A year after the documentary's release, Dorothy stood in Washington, D.C., testifying before Congress about federal elder protection legislation. I swallowed evidence to preserve my truth, she told the assembled senators and representatives. That should never be necessary. We need federal standards for background checks, mandatory reporting, independent oversight. We need to make it easier to speak up and harder to get away with abuse. The hearing lasted 6 hours. Dorothy testified for 45 minutes. Other survivors testified. Advocates, medical professionals, law enforcement. And then something unexpected happened. A senator stood up, tears in his eyes. My mother died 5 years ago, Senator Marcus Blake said, his voice breaking. She fell down the stairs at the nursing home where we'd placed her. They said it was an accident. But now, hearing these testimonies, I wonder if someone pushed her, if she was scared and I didn't see it, if she died trying to tell me something I wasn't listening to hear. The room fell silent. I failed my mother, Blake continued. I can't change that. But I can make damn sure this legislation passes so other children don't fail theirs. Mrs. Wellington, you have my vote. You have my commitment. And you have my profound gratitude for your courage. The bill passed with bipartisan support. The Elder Justice and Protection Act became federal law, establishing nationwide standards for caregiver background checks, creating a federal database for tracking elder abuse reports, and providing funding for prevention programs. Dorothy watched the president sign it into law on live television from her living room in Atlanta. Marcus on one side, Sarah on the other, surrounded by volunteers and survivors who'd become family. We did it, Marcus whispered. No, Dorothy said. We started it. The work continues. That night, Dorothy's phone rang. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer, exhausted from the day's emotions. But something made her pick up. Mrs. Wellington? My name is Amanda. I'm 17. My grandmother is being hurt by my uncle, and she's too scared to tell anyone. I saw the documentary. Can you help her? Dorothy closed her eyes, felt the familiar pull of purpose and exhaustion warring in her chest. Then she opened them and chose. Yes, Amanda. Tell me everything. Your grandmother is going to be okay. I promise. Because that was the thing about healing. It wasn't linear.
It wasn't finished. It was choosing, every single day, to turn pain into purpose.
To transform survival into service. Dorothy Wellington was 72 years old. She'd been beaten, starved, drugged, and nearly destroyed. She'd swallowed evidence to preserve her truth. She'd fought her way back from the edge of oblivion. And now, she was helping others do the same. One phone call at a time. One survivor at a time. One voice at a time. The paper airplanes on her wall had multiplied. She'd started collecting them from other survivors. 23 had become hundreds, each one a plea for help, each one a prayer answered. Dorothy looked at them now, this wall of desperate hope, and made a decision. Tomorrow, she would take a day off, would rest, heal, let herself just be. But tonight, there was Amanda's grandmother who needed help. Tonight, there was work to be done. And Dorothy Wellington had never been one to leave work unfinished. Dorothy stayed on the phone with Amanda for 40 minutes, gathering information, making notes, creating an action plan. The girl's grandmother, Catherine, was 76 and living with her son, Amanda's uncle Derek, who'd moved in 6 months ago after losing his job. The pattern was familiar. Too familiar. "He takes her Social Security checks," Amanda said, her voice shaking. "And when she asks for money for her medications, he yells at her. Last week, I saw bruises on her arms. When I asked about them, she said she fell. But her eyes, Mrs. Wellington, her eyes were so scared." "Amanda, I need you to listen carefully. Can you get your grandmother alone, even for 5 minutes?" "She's at my house right now. My mom invited her for dinner. Uncle Derek doesn't know." "Perfect. Put her on the phone." There was shuffling, whispered conversation. Then an older voice, thin and trembling. "Hello? Catherine, my name is Dorothy Wellington. Your granddaughter is very brave and very smart to call me. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Are you safe?" Silence. Then a sound that broke Dorothy's heart. Quiet crying. "No, I'm not safe. But I don't know what to do. He's my son, my only son. If I report him, where will he go? He has nothing." "Catherine, where will you go if he kills you? Because that's where this is heading. You know that, don't you?" More crying. "I thought I could handle it. I thought if I was quieter, more agreeable, he'd stop being so angry." "It doesn't work that way. Trust me. I know. I tried that too." Dorothy softened her voice. "But here's what I learned. His anger isn't your fault. His choices aren't your responsibility. Your only responsibility is to yourself, to your safety. I'm 76 years old. I'm tired. I don't have the strength to fight. Then let me fight for you. Let Amanda fight for you. Let the people who love you carry some of this weight." Dorothy paused. "Catherine, do you want help? Real help? Because I can have police there within the hour. I can have advocates lined up. I can make sure you're protected. But I need you to say yes. I need you to choose yourself." The silence stretched so long, Dorothy thought the call had dropped. Then, barely audible, "Yes. Help me. Please." Dorothy made 3 more calls. First to Officer Hayes in Atlanta, who connected her with a detective in Amanda's city of Memphis. Second, to a domestic violence shelter she'd partnered with. Third, to a lawyer who specialized in elder abuse cases. By the time Catherine finished dinner at Amanda's house, the plan was in place. The police arrived at Derek's house at 8 p.m. with a warrant to check on Catherine's welfare. They found evidence of financial exploitation, bank statements showing he'd withdrawn over $30,000 from her accounts. They found her medications locked in his bedroom, half of them expired,
because he'd refused to refill them. They found a notebook where he'd written detailed plans to have her declared incompetent so he could take full control of her assets. Derek was arrested on the spot. Amanda called Dorothy at midnight, crying with relief.
They got him. Grandma's safe. She's staying with us now. She's scared, but she's safe.
Good. Tomorrow, I'll connect you with resources, support groups, legal aid, counseling. You're not alone in this.
Mrs. Wellington, thank you. Thank you for believing us,
for helping us. After the call ended, Dorothy sat in the darkness of her bedroom, exhausted, but unable to sleep. How many Catherines were out there tonight? How many Amandas watching their grandmothers suffer and not knowing what to do? The answer was too many, always too many. Marcus found her at 2 a.m, still awake, staring at her wall of paper airplanes.
Mom, you need to sleep. I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see their faces. Catherine, Patricia, Margaret.
All the ones we've helped and all the ones we haven't reached yet. You can't save everyone.
But I have to try. Don't you see? Every person we don't help is someone suffering what I suffered. Living in fear, believing they're alone. I can't let that happen. I won't.
Marcus sat down beside her. Mom, I'm worried about you. You're not eating. You're not sleeping. You're giving everything to this cause and leaving nothing for yourself.
I have enough.
Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you look like someone running on fumes. Marcus took her hand. I love what you're doing. I'm proud of you. But I'm also scared I'm going to lose you to this work, the same way I almost lost you to Vivian. Dorothy felt tears prick her eyes.
I don't know how to do both, how to heal and help at the same time.
Maybe you start by accepting that you can't do this alone. The Recorder Project has volunteers now, other survivors who can take calls, lead groups, fight battles. You don't have to carry it all yourself.
But it's my responsibility. I started this.
And now it's bigger than you. That's a good thing, Mom. That means it'll continue even when you need to step back, even when you need to rest. Dorothy knew he was right. But knowing and doing were different things. The guilt of resting while others suffered felt like betrayal. The next morning, Dorothy received an email that made her hands shake. The Nobel Peace Prize Committee had nominated her for her work in elder advocacy. The nomination letter cited her courage in speaking up, her creation of the Recorder Project, her role in passing federal legislation.
Marcus, look at this.
He read over her shoulder, then hugged her tight. Mom, this is incredible. You deserve this recognition. I don't want recognition. I want change. You've created both. Can't you just accept that you've done something remarkable? But accepting felt like stopping. And Dorothy didn't know how to stop. The nomination brought more media attention, more interviews, more people reaching out with stories of abuse. The Recorder Project hotline went from 100 calls a week to 500. Sarah pulled Dorothy aside 3 weeks later. We need to talk about expansion. We've gotten requests to open chapters in 43 cities. We have the demand, but we need infrastructure, training programs, standardized protocols. And we need you to step back from day-to-day operations and focus on the big picture. Step back? We're busier than ever. Exactly, which is why we need you in a leadership role, not an operational one. You're spending 12 hours a day on the phone with individual callers when you should be training others to make those calls. You're leading every support group when you should be teaching facilitators how to lead them. Dorothy felt panic rising.
But those people called for me. They need me.
They need help. That help doesn't have to come from you personally. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. Dorothy, you're one person, a remarkable person, but still just one. If you burn out, if you collapse, the whole project suffers. We need you healthy and strategic, not exhausted and tactical. That afternoon,
Dorothy attended a support group she'd been leading for 6 months. 23 survivors who'd become like family. She'd planned to tell them about the organizational changes, about stepping back. But when she walked in, they were already talking, sharing stories, supporting each other. And Dorothy realized something profound. They didn't need her anymore, not the way they had in the beginning. They'd found strength in each other. Margaret Chen was leading the discussion, her voice confident.
The hardest part for me was forgiving myself, for not seeing the signs earlier, for not speaking up sooner.
But you did speak up, Robert Patterson said. That's what matters. Not the when, but the fact that you found your voice. Dorothy stood in the doorway, watching this community she'd helped create, now thriving without her at the center. It should have felt like loss. Instead, it felt like success.
After the meeting, Margaret pulled her aside. "You've been quiet lately. Everything okay?" Dorothy hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I'm struggling. With letting go. With accepting that the work has grown beyond me." "Good. That means it's working," Margaret smiled. "You gave us tools, Dorothy. You showed us we weren't alone. But we have to walk our own paths now, and you have to walk yours."
What if I don't know what my path is anymore? What if this work is all I am now? Then you're still letting Vivian define you, just in a different way. Margaret's words hit like a punch. She made you a victim. Don't make yourself a martyr. Neither one is the real you. That night, Dorothy made a decision. She called an emergency board meeting for the recorder project. "I'm stepping down as executive director," she announced. "Sarah will take over day-to-day operations. I'll stay on as founder and board chair, focusing on policy work and public advocacy. But I can't be everything to everyone anymore, and I shouldn't try." The room was silent. Then Sarah spoke. "Dorothy, are you sure?" "I'm sure that I'm exhausted. I'm sure that I'm not the best person to run a national organization. I'm a 72-year-old woman who survived abuse and wanted to help others do the same. That doesn't make me qualified to manage budgets and HR and strategic planning." Marcus, who joined the meeting, squeezed her hand under the table. "But," Dorothy continued, "I can tell my story. I can testify at hearings. I can train volunteers. I can be the voice that reminds people why this work matters. That's my strength. So let me do that, and let others do the rest." The transition took 3 months. Dorothy trained 6 new crisis counselors, established a speakers bureau of 20 survivors willing to share their stories, and created a comprehensive training manual for support group facilitators. And then she did something she hadn't done in 2 years. She took a vacation. Marcus rented a beach house in South Carolina for a week. Just the 2 of them. No phones, no emails, no crisis calls. Dorothy protested at first, convinced the project would fall apart without her. It didn't. Sarah sent daily updates. The hotline was running smoothly. Support groups were thriving. A new chapter opened in Denver. "See?" Marcus said on the 3rd day as they sat watching the ocean. "The world keeps turning even when you're not pushing it." Dorothy laughed. A real laugh. The kind she hadn't felt bubble up in months. "I guess I'm not as essential as I thought." "You're essential. You're just not the only essential thing. There's a difference." On the last day of vacation, Dorothy got a call that made her heart stop. It was Officer Hayes. "Dorothy, I need to tell you something. Vivian Chase was found dead in her cell this morning." The world tilted. Dorothy sat down hard on the beach sand. "What happened?" "Suicide. She left a note. It's brief. She asked that it be given to you." "What does it say?" Hayes read it aloud. "I destroyed 4 families before you. I plan to destroy yours too. But you destroyed me instead." "I hope you're satisfied." Dorothy felt numb. She'd forgiven Vivian, had meant it. But now, Vivian was dead, and Dorothy didn't know what to feel. "Are you okay?" Hayes asked. "I don't know. Is it terrible that I'm relieved? That I'm glad she can't hurt anyone else?" "It's human. You're allowed to feel however you feel." After the call, Dorothy walked along the beach for an hour, processing. Vivian was dead. The woman who'd tormented her, who'd nearly destroyed her, was gone, and Dorothy felt nothing but a strange emptiness. That evening, she called Dr. Morrison. "Vivian killed herself, and I don't feel guilty about it. Should I?" "Why would you feel guilty?" "Because maybe if I hadn't prosecuted her, if I hadn't testified, if I hadn't made such a public case, she'd still be alive. Or she'd be out of prison in 10 years, running the same con on another family." "Dorothy, you didn't kill her. Her choices killed her. The same choices that led her to abuse you and 4 other families." "I forgave her. I told her I forgave her during that prison interview." "And that was generous and healing for you. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. She was facing 15 years in prison for terrible crimes she committed. That's not your fault." Dorothy sat with that truth. Let it settle. "I think I'm ready to truly move on. Not just from Vivian, but from defining myself by what she did to me."
What would that look like? "I don't know yet, but I want to find out." 6 months later, Dorothy stood in a high school gymnasium in Atlanta, watching Marcus marry Sarah in a ceremony full of love and hope. Dorothy wore lavender, her favorite color, and felt genuine joy for the first time in years. During the reception, Sarah pulled her aside. "Thank you for supporting us, for welcoming me into the family. You make my son happy. You share his values. You're good to him and to me."
What's not to welcome?
"I know it must be hard. After Vivian, you're nothing like Vivian. You see people. You care about people. You're real." Dorothy hugged her. "Welcome to the family, daughter." As the reception wound down, Dorothy found herself surrounded by an unlikely collection of friends. Margaret Chen and her son David, Robert Patterson and his daughter, the Rodriguez family, Ellen Whitney, Amanda and her grandmother Catherine, all the people whose lives had intertwined with hers through shared trauma and shared healing. "We're starting a new tradition," Margaret announced. "An annual reunion for Recorder Project survivors and volunteers. A chance to celebrate how far we've come." "I love that idea," Dorothy said. "Where?" "Here. Atlanta. Where it all started." Margaret raised her glass. "To Dorothy Wellington, who showed us that one voice can start a revolution." "To Dorothy," they echoed. Dorothy felt tears on her cheeks, but for once, they were happy tears. "To all of us. To surviving. To thriving. To refusing to be silent." The first annual Recorder Project reunion brought together 200 survivors from across the country. Dorothy gave a keynote speech, but she also sat in the audience for other sessions, learning from people who'd traveled their own healing journeys. A woman named Rosa shared how she'd left her abusive son and rebuilt her life at age 83. A man named James talked about recovering his stolen savings and starting a support group for male abuse survivors. A young woman named Keisha described caring for her grandmother and recognizing abuse early because of the Recorder Project's educational programs. Sitting there, listening to these voices, Dorothy realized she'd done more than survive her own trauma. She'd created a space where others could survive theirs. That night, back home, Dorothy pulled out a journal Dr. Morrison had encouraged her to keep. She'd resisted at first, convinced she didn't have time for reflection. But now she opened it and wrote, "2 years ago, I swallowed a recording device to preserve evidence of my abuse. Today, I don't need to swallow anything. My voice is loud enough on its own. I've learned that healing isn't about forgetting what happened.
It's about integrating it into who I am without letting it define me. I'm Dorothy Wellington. I'm a mother, a friend, an advocate.
I'm a survivor. But I'm also just a woman who likes jambalaya and mystery novels and watching the sunset. I'm allowed to be all of those things. The world doesn't need me to be a symbol. It just needs me to be human. 3 years after swallowing the recorder, Dorothy received news that the Nobel Peace Prize Committee had selected her as a laureate. The ceremony in Oslo was overwhelming, standing before dignitaries and leaders, accepting recognition for work that had started in desperation and fear. But the moment that mattered most came after, when a young woman approached her with tears streaming down her face. "Mrs. Wellington, I'm a medical student. I'm studying geriatrics because of you. Because I watched your documentary and realized how many elderly patients I'd seen with signs of abuse that I didn't recognize. I want to be the doctor who sees what others miss, who believes when others doubt." Dorothy hugged the stranger who represented a future where abuse would be recognized, reported, stopped. "What's your name?" "Aaliyah. Aaliyah Jackson." "Well, Aaliyah Jackson, thank you for seeing. The world needs more doctors like you." On the flight home, Marcus asked what she was thinking about. That moment, that young woman, she's the real prize. Knowing that the work will continue after I'm gone, that I've planted seeds that will keep growing. You've done more than plant seeds, Mom. You've grown an entire forest. Dorothy looked out the plane window at clouds stretching endlessly. Somewhere down there were people suffering in silence, but somewhere else were people finding their voices, speaking their truths, demanding to be heard. The balance was shifting, slowly, incrementally, but shifting. And that was enough. 5 years after the night she swallowed evidence to save herself, Dorothy Wellington stood in her living room surrounded by the people she loved most. Marcus and Sarah, and their baby daughter, named Catherine Dorothy Wellington, Margaret Chen, the other survivors, friends and volunteers and advocates. They were celebrating Dorothy's 77th birthday and the Recorder Project's 5th anniversary. The numbers were staggering. Over 50,000 calls handled. Support groups in all 50 states. 3 more states had passed comprehensive elder protection laws. Thousands of survivors helped. Hundreds of abusers prosecuted. But the number that mattered most to Dorothy was one. One voice. Hers. Speaking up when silence felt safer. Fighting back when giving up felt easier. That one voice had multiplied into thousands, into millions, if you counted everyone who'd heard her story and changed how they saw elderly people, how they treated caregivers, how they responded to signs of abuse. As the party wound down and guests began leaving, baby Catherine fussed in her mother's arms. Sarah tried to soothe her, but the baby kept crying. "Let me try," Dorothy said, taking her granddaughter. The moment Catherine settled in Dorothy's arms, she quieted. Those big dark eyes staring up with perfect trust. "You're magic with her," Sarah said. "I'm her grandmother. It's my job to spoil her and teach her important things." "Like what?" Dorothy looked down at Catherine, this perfect, innocent life, and thought about what she wanted this child to know. Like how to use her voice, how to recognize when something's wrong and speak up about it, how to believe other people when they tell you they're hurting, how to be brave even when you're scared. Marcus came over, wrapped his arms around both of them. "She'll learn all that from watching you. I hope she never needs those lessons. I hope she grows up in a world where elder abuse is rare instead of common, where people believe survivors instead of doubting them, where speaking up is celebrated instead of punished. You're building that world, Mom, every day." Dorothy swayed gently, rocking her granddaughter, and felt something she'd thought was lost forever. Hope. Not the desperate hope of survival, but the quiet hope of peace. She'd survived.
She'd healed. She'd helped others do the same. And now, holding the sleeping baby who would grow up never knowing the fear Dorothy had lived with, never experiencing the silence Dorothy had endured, Dorothy knew with absolute certainty that every moment of pain had been worth it. Because silence dies when one voice speaks up, and that one voice becomes a chorus, and that chorus becomes a revolution. Dorothy Wellington had swallowed evidence to preserve her truth. But her greatest legacy wasn't what she'd swallowed. It was what she'd spoken. The words that had refused to stay silent. The testimony that had changed laws. The story that had given permission to thousands of others to tell their own. She looked at the wall of paper airplanes, hundreds of them now, each one representing a life saved, a voice heard, a person who'd chosen courage over silence. And she smiled, because she finally understood. Those paper airplanes weren't pleas for help anymore. They were proof that help had come, that voices had been heard, that silence had been shattered. Dorothy Wellington was no longer invisible, no longer voiceless, no longer trapped. She was free. And she had made damn sure that thousands of others could be free too. That was her truth. That was her legacy. That was her victory. And it would echo long after her own voice fell silent.